Hello, hello, welcome back. So we're going to get started with example 4. So you may be able to factor a polynomial by grouping. Okay, so this is going to be factoring a polynomial by grouping. Now, you need to know when to do this, okay? And so when a polynomial has 4 terms, so that's the biggie, okay? You're going to factor a polynomial by grouping when it has 4 terms. Okay, so when a polynomial has 4 terms, you can make 2 groups and factor out the GCF from each group. Okay, the big thing here is in order to factor a polynomial by grouping, it has to have 4 terms. All right, so let's look at a couple examples. So whenever you see something like 4a, you see how this is a polynomial, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So when you see that there's 4 terms, there should be like, oh, I got to factor by grouping. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Let me show you how to do it. So there's kind of like a couple different steps. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms as 2 groups. Okay? And so I'm going to look at this first 2, and what I'm looking at with just these 2 groups, right, or these 2 things, is we want to figure out, well, what's in common with them? What's the GCF of these 2 in orange, right? So there's numbers, there's letters. So first I'm going to look at the numbers. So what are the numbers? What's the greatest common factor, right, between 6 and 4? And I would say the greatest number that goes into 6 and 4 would be 2. So we're going to factor out a 2, like that. And then we're going to look at the variables, h's. Okay, what's the greatest common factor between here? So the common factor is obviously h, and the greatest amount of h's that go into both here would be h cubed. Okay? So that's what I'm going to factor out. And so then I'm just going to go, okay, 2 times what is 6? And it's 3. And h cubed times what is h to the 4th, and you need 1 more h to get to h to the 4th, right? And now we got to get this -4, so I'm going to go 2 times what is going to give us a -4. Well, this has to be negative, and then 2 times what is 4, it's going to be 2 times 2 is 4, right? And then h cubed times what is h cubed? Well, whenever it's h cubed and h cubed, it would be 1 h cubed times 1, but we don't need to write 2 times 1, right? So that means we're done there, okay? And then we're going to move to the yellow portion, and we're going to do the same thing, okay? What's the greatest common factor here? Well, see, I'm looking at the numbers and letters, but there's no letter here, so it's only going to be a number, okay? So what's the greatest number that goes into 12 and 8? And I would say it would be 4. 4 would be the greatest number that goes into 12 and 8. And since this is positive and negative, it's just going to be plus, right? If they were both negative, then I would probably factor out a negative, but this is positive and this is negative, so you don't need to factor out a negative. So 4, right? And then we're just going to go, okay, 4 times what is 12? 4 times 3, and then there's just that h, and then 4 times what is a -8? So we need a negative here, and 4 times what is 8? It's going to be 2. All right? Now, that's the first step. So you have 4 terms, and you group them together for 2 groups. You factor out the GCF for each group individually, and now look, do you see anything? This is totally like the last example, example 3. See, look, there's a 3h minus 2, and there's a 3h minus 2. They have that in common. So now we're just back to like example 3 problem. We're going to factor that out. And then what's left? 2h cubed plus 4. And that is it. That is how you factor by grouping. So there's a couple different steps, right? The first thing is you see that there's 4. You group the first 2 together, you group the last 2 together, and within those you find the greatest common factor, and you factor that out, right? Here with the orange group, you do the same thing with the yellow group. And then what we notice is they have the same thing here, so we're going to factor that out, and then what's left is 2h cubed plus 4. Okay, now this says factor each polynomial by grouping, and then check your answer. So we need to check this. So I'm going to write this out, 3h minus 2, 2h cubed plus 4. And how are we going to check it? Well, this is multiplying binomials, right, which would be 4. No, not 4, FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. Or you can think about it as doing the distributive property twice, right? This is from last chapter. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to distribute this 3h first. So 3 times 2 is 6. The first, right? H times h cubed would be h to the 4th. And we're going to do the outside, which would be here. 3 times 4, it's a positive 12. And then just h. And now we're going to do the inside here. Negative 2 times 2 would be negative 4. And then just h cubed. And then here we have negative 2 times 4, which would give us negative 8. We look if we can combine like terms. There's an h to the 4th, there's an h cubed, and there's a constant. So we can't. So then let's just look here and see if this is the same thing as this. And we have that 6h to the 4th. There's our negative 4h cubed. There's our positive 12h and our negative 8. So we could totally write, if we just switched the order here, we would have exactly the same thing. Right there. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and try this again. Okay, so we're going to factor each polynomial by grouping and then check our answer. So we see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So the first thing we're going to do is look at these first 2 terms, right? And look at these last 2 terms. Here. Okay, and then we're going to factor out that GCF. So what's common here? Okay, I see numbers, I see letters, right? So what's the GCF between 5 and 15? Well, that's going to be 5. That's the biggest number that goes into 5. 5 goes into 5, and 5 goes into 15. Then we're going to look at the variables. What's the greatest common factor between y to the 4th and y cubed? Would be y cubed, right? So that's what we're going to factor out. And then we're going to go, okay, 5 times what is 5? Well, it's 1, right? But we don't need to write that quite yet. And then y cubed times what is y to the 4th? Well, it'd be y. Y cubed times y is y to the 4th. And then we're going to try to get this term. So 5 times what is a negative 15? Well, we need a negative number, and this is positive, so that means this has to be negative. 5 times what is 15? 5 times 3. 5 times 3 is 15. And then y cubed times what is y cubed? Well, that's the same, so it would be 1, but we don't need to write 3 times 1. So that's it. This is all we need right there. Okay, so we factored the orange. Now we need to factor the yellow. And so first we're going to look and see if they have numbers in common or common factor within the numbers. This is 1 and this is 3, so no. Then we're just going to look at the variables. And I'd say the greatest common factor with the variables would just be y. And it's going to be positive. It's going to be positive because there's a positive and negative, and so if they were both negative, we would factor out a negative, but they're not, so we just keep it positive. Okay, then we're going to go y times what is y squared, and that would be y, and then y times what is negative 3y. So we're going to need that negative there. We're going to need the 3, and y times 1 is y, right? So there we have it. And do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it? We are back to example 3 now. You should have this y minus 3. That's in common. So we can factor that out, right? And then we're just left with 5y cubed plus y. And there's our answer. But we're going to check this over here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, right, this is multiplying binomials, so we're going to do FOIL, or the distributive property, twice. So we're going to distribute here and here. So y times 5y cubed, so the 5 stays. Y times y to the 3rd is y to the 4th. And then we're going to go y times y, which is just a positive y squared. And then we're going to distribute on the bottom. Negative 3 times 5y cubed. So negative 3, I'm going to do the numbers first. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, and then we just write y cubed. And then negative 3 times y, it's going to be negative 3y. Okay? Then I'm just going to go ahead and write this in standard form, right? The highest degree first, 5y to the fourth, and then negative 15y cubed, and then positive y squared, and minus 3y. So we want to check this and see if it's the same thing here. And if we look, we got 5y to the fourth minus 15y cubed plus y squared minus 3y. So we did it. Woohoo! All right, so this is our answer right there. That's how you factor by grouping when there's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Okay, let's look at another example here. Okay. All right, so what do we see? We see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, so we're going to factor by grouping, right? So we're going to group those first two together. And then we're going to group the second two together. Okay? And factor out that GCF, right? So, you know what? I want you to try this, okay? So here's my friend, the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device. Go ahead and work out this problem. When you get done, press play and we'll go over it together. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, let's see how you did. Okay, so we have to factor out that greatest common factor. There's numbers, there's letters. So we have 6 and 8. The greatest common factor between 6 and 8 is 2, right? And we have b cubed and b squared. The greatest common factor between those two would be b squared. And then we have to fill in here. So 2 times what is 6? 2 times 3. B squared times what is b cubed? You need a b. And then we need a positive. 2 times what is 8? And that would be 2 times 4 is 8. And then b squared times what is b squared? Well, b squared times 1 is b squared. We don't need to write the 1. So there we have it. Now we're going to move to the yellow portion. There's numbers and there's no letters, right? So it's just numbers. So what's the greatest common factor between 9 and 12? Well, that would be 3. So we're going to factor out that 3. And 3 times what is 9? 3 times 3, b. And then 3 times what is a positive 12? So it's going to be positive. And 3 times 4 is 12. Do you see it? Do you see it? Yes, we have a 3b plus 4 in common, right? So we're going to factor that out. 3b plus 4, and then what's left is 2b squared plus 3. Boom! There's your answer. If you got that right, great job. But we have to check it, right? So we're going to go over here. We're going to check it. 3b plus 4. Okay, so let's start here. Okay, we're going to distribute this. So we're doing FOIL, a distributive property twice. So 3b times 2b squared. So 3 times 2 is 6. b times b squared is going to be b cubed. And then we're going here. 3 times 3 is a positive 9b. And then we're going for the inside here. 4 times 2 is a positive 8b squared. And then 4 times 3 is just 12. Okay, then we're just going to write it in standard form. So it's going to be 6b cubed, and then plus 8b squared, plus 9b plus 12. And is this the same? Is 6b cubed plus 8b squared plus 9b plus 12. We did it. It's right. Perfect. Okay, here's the last one right here. And I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own. So here's my friend, the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device. Go ahead and work out this problem. When you get done, press play, and we'll go over it. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, let's see how you did. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to 4 terms. We're going to factor by grouping, right? So we're going to group those first two together. And these last two together. Okay. then we're going to just factor out the greatest common factor with the orange group. So we have numbers, we have letters. I see that between 4 and 24, the greatest common factor is going to be 4. And then what's the greatest common factor between r cubed and r? Well, it's r. Why did I write that? I got to squeeze that r in there. I wrote this parenthesis too soon. Okay, so 4 times what is 4? It's going to be 1, but I'm not going to write it yet. R times what is r cubed? And it's going to be r squared. And so you see how I didn't really, that 1 is not needed because I wrote the r squared. So that's why I kind of wait on the 1. Because if I write a variable there, then the 1 is no longer needed. Okay, but if it helps you to write the 1, go ahead and you can just write 1 times r squared. That's fine. Okay, so we have, now we need this term. So 4 times what is a positive 24? It's going to be positive. 4 times what is 24? 6. R times what is r? And again, it would be r times 1 is r. So we're done here. And then, okay, are there any numbers we can factor out? No. What about letters? No. So this is just it. R squared plus 6. Now this one is a tad tricky, right? Because we didn't really factor anything there. But if you see, we have r squared plus 6 here, and we have r squared plus 6 there. So we can actually factor out that r squared plus 6. And what we're left with is 4r plus, and then this would be 1. Okay, that is the answer. So whenever you factor out the whole thing, like completely, you factor that out, that r squared plus 6, what you leave in its place is you have to put a 1 there. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this. Okie doke. So let's go here. FOIL, the first, or the distributive property, 2 times. R squared times 4r, we're going to have 4. R squared times r is r cubed. Then we're going to distribute here. R squared times 1 is just r squared. And then we're going to do the bottom. 6 times 4r is positive 24r. And then 6 times 1 is a positive 6. Okay, so if we see this is not written in standard form. This is written in standard form. But what I notice is we have 4r cubed, we got our r squared here, we got our 24r and our 6. So if we just interchange those two, then we would have the same exact thing, which is right there. So if you got that right, yokedakimashita, you did a wonderful job. If not, just go ahead and fix your notes so they look exactly like mine. And I'll see you in a little bit for example 5.